If walls, floors, and ceilings were all perfectly straight and flat, there'd be no need to ever scribe, but we all know that's not the case. So if you're looking for an easy and accurate way to scribe, then stick around and check out my shop-made solution. Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of DP Shop Talk. And today we're going to be taking a look at a custom scribe tool that I made to make the process of scribing easier and more accurate. Now, this is a follow-up video to the video that I did on my custom jigsaw scribe base. So if you haven't seen that, make sure you check that video out as well. So for anybody that's not familiar with the term scribing, it basically means to transfer the shape of one surface onto another surface so that when you cut along that cut line, there's a perfect joint between the two. So an example of that would be the shape of a wall onto a cabinet panel, so that when that panel butts into the wall, all the irregularities of the wall are accounted for, and it gives a nice tight fit. If you just had a straight line down there, like I said, walls, ceilings, and floors usually aren't straight and flat. So if you just had a straight line, then you'd have kind of some gaps where there's high spots and low spots, but when you scribe it in, you get a nice tight fit. So I'll quickly go over the design and features of this scribe tool, and then I'll do a short tutorial on how to actually scribe in a cabinet panel. So the scribe tool is designed to work with a micro Sharpie. So it just friction fits into a hole in the short arm. And then the long arm, which is what will actually slide along the reference surface, so the wall or floor or ceiling, whatever you happen to be scribing, it has a nice broad surface on there, so that when you reference it on, it's not moving around, it's not rocking side to side or back and forth. So as you slide it along, everything stays very consistent. So that's where it becomes very accurate. Now it's got a brass knurled knob at each joint and a brass machine screw that goes through as well. So that lets you lock and unlock the arm, so you can adjust the scribe tool. So I'll show you in a few minutes why I went with a Sharpie for the marking tool, because I do have some reasons behind that. Now I won't go into detail about how I actually made this, because I'll put the link in the video description below for a how-to article that I did for BeThePro.com, and it shows how to actually make the scribe tool as well as a full measure drawing. So if you're interested in making your own, then check that link out, and it gives all the details about how to actually make it. So now you actually get to see the scribe tool in action. So what I'm going to do is demonstrate how to scribe in a cabinet gable panel. Now this isn't a real cabinet gable panel for my shop cabinets. My shop cabinets have been kind of a work in progress over the last few years. Eventually I want to make some nice frame and panel gables for them, and frame and panel doors and drawer fronts and some proper countertop, all that. But for now, like I said, they're work in progress. So for demonstration purposes, we'll use this cabinet gable and this wall to show you how it all works. So the reason for the red Sharpie, like I mentioned, is twofold. First, I use green masking tape to make my scribe mark on, and I find that the red gives a really nice contrast on the green, so you can see your line really clearly when you're cutting to it or shaving it down with the block plane afterwards. And the other reason is the Sharpie doesn't rub off like pencil will. I find sometimes if you're using pencil and you have a bit of sawdust on your cut line and you brush that off, sometimes the pencil will fade a little bit, whereas the Sharpie won't. It'll stay nice and crisp. So that's why I like using the Sharpie. Now I used to use just a regular compass and a pencil, and that gave pretty decent results, but I found that when you're holding it against the wall, it's hard to keep a really consistent angle as you bring it down. Sometimes it'll come in and out a little bit, And that's what I really tried to avoid with my Scribe tool, having that big reference surface on there. Then when you hold it against the wall, it stays very consistent. There's no rocking back and forth. It's a nice large surface, whereas the compass just has a very small surface on there, so it's hard to keep it quite as accurate. So that's the reason for that bigger reference surface on the Scribe tool. So the first step is to get your masking tape applied. Now what I do is find sort of the rough width of the finished panel, and then set the masking tape so it's roughly centered on that. So in this case about 12 1/4, so I measured back 12 1/4 and roughly put the masking tape there. It doesn't have to be exact, just as long as your mark will fall on the masking tape and not on the finished panel. So then I find the point at which the cabinet is the closest to the wall, which in this case is the bottom. The wall is a little bit at a plumb, so the bottom I know is where the gable panel is going to be touching when I put it in place to scribe it. So I'll put it in place, flush up the bottom with the bottom of the cabinet, and then take a clamp and clamp it in place. Now I take my my small square, which is graduated. I find that's a handy measuring tool. It's one of my favorite measuring tools, actually. Just a 6-inch Veritas square from Lee Valley. I use that for just about everything. Use that or whatever, tape measure, whatever you have, and measure how far out the gable panel projects past the front edge of the cabinets. So in this case, we're 1/2 inch. So then measure up top and get it set to 1/2 inch. So then you know that your panel is running parallel to the front edge of your cabinets. So I'll just double check that. 1/2 inch. And 1/2 inch. So we know that that now the front edge is parallel, like I mentioned, and so now we can go ahead and get the Scribe tool set. Now the way to do that, in this case where you need to bring it back a set amount, is take your whatever measuring device you're using and measure out from the wall 1/2 inch and make a little mark. So now that mark is what your Scribe tool gets set to. So then you reference the Scribe tool onto the wall, line it up with that mark, adjust it so that it's right on that mark you made. And now you can go ahead and actually make the Scribe mark. I usually just go from top to bottom. And that gives you your mark to cut to. Now, if you were working on something like a piece of countertop where you don't need to necessarily have it brought back a specific dimension, then rather than taking your measurement at the front, transferring it to the back, and setting your Scribe tool to that, you can just take your Scribe tool and set it to the largest gap that you have. So in this case, it would be at the top, since the wall is a little at a plumb and the panel is away from the wall at the top. You would just set it to that distance and come down the length of it, or countertop across the back or the ends. So what that does is it will take your biggest gap, and you're basically taking nothing off at that point, and then where it comes closer to the wall, then it's taking that distance and scribing it along so that when you cut along your line, it fits in perfectly, and it takes off the least amount of material possible to get that tight fit to the wall. So that's kind of two different scribing situations where something needs to come back an exact amount or just an arbitrary amount to get a tight fit. So I find a lot of people get confused about how or what distance to actually set their scribe tool to, so I hope that that makes sense. So I clamped the panel to my MPT and used the jigsaw scribe base that I mentioned earlier to make a back beveled cut. So I stayed just to the waist side of the line to leave some room for fine tuning. Now after the cut is made, I take my block plane and come right to the line. I find that that will give you a more exact fit than if you try and cut to the line with the jigsaw, because there's usually a little bit of variation since the blade will bend back and forth a little bit. So a quick test fit shows me if there's any more fine tuning to do with the block plane, and once I'm happy with the fit, then I peel the tape off and actually install the panel. So with that back bevel on there, it makes it very easy to fine tune with the block plane, since it's just that leading edge that you're planing rather than the entire thickness of the panel. So that gives you a good idea of how my scribe tool works and the approach that I use for scribing. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I got frustrated using the compass because it just didn't give quite the accuracy I was looking for, since that angle can kind of vary back and forth because it doesn't have a large reference surface. So that's what led me to design my custom scribe tool. As we all know, I love shop-made efficiency solutions, so it was just the natural thing to do. So I got this panel put up and fitted in place, and a nice tight fit on the wall and flush on the front edge. So I hope that you found this video helpful. If you have, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, make sure you leave your ideas, questions, and what's worked for you in the comments below. Let's get some shop talk going about scribing. What works for you? What do you use? And if you do happen to make one of these scribe tools, I'd love to see some pictures of it as well. And I always appreciate the feedback. I've been getting a lot of good feedback lately from you guys, the viewers, and I really appreciate that. I like to know what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong. Let me know what your thoughts are. So thanks for watching, and until next time, let's talk shop.